The 1970s were a completely different time, an era where life moved a little slower, the rules were fewer, and the boundaries between what was safe and what was reckless were often blurry. It was a decade where freedom reigned supreme, not just in politics or culture, but in everyday life. Parents weren't hovering, kids had the run of the neighborhood, and nobody thought twice about things that today would be shut down by law enforcement or banned by safety regulators. The things we used to do back then weren't just common, they were expected, normal. And in hindsight, they were also pretty dangerous. Take railroad tracks, for example. For many kids, they weren't seen as hazardous infrastructure. They were a playground, an adventure zone. You'd see kids balancing on the rails, using them as makeshift tightropes, or walking long distances along them as a shortcut to school or a friend's house. Sometimes they'd put pennies on the track just to watch them get flattened under the weight of a passing train. Others dared each other to run across the trestle before the locomotive came through. The thrill was unmatched. You'd wave at the engineer, feel the earth rumble beneath your feet, and cover your ears as the horn blasted. It was childhood magic wrapped in danger. But today, that kind of fun is strictly illegal. Railroad companies don't mess around with trespassers, and the penalties can be severe. And honestly, with how many accidents have happened over the years, it's easy to see why. But if you grew up in that time, there's no denying the rush of it. The adventure, the freedom, and the sheer joy of doing something a little dangerous. Back in the same era, public panic over food additives led to some strange turns in consumer behavior. One of the most memorable examples was the disappearance of red M&Ms. Around the mid-70s, health concerns over red dye num-2 hit the news. Studies suggested a possible link to cancer, and people freaked out. Mars, the candy company behind M&Ms, decided to pull red M&Ms from circulation, not because their red candies actually contained the dye, but just to calm the public down. Ironically, people continued eating foods that did contain the dye, like certain cereals and sodas, until the FDA officially banned it in 1976. Red M&Ms didn't return until over a decade later, in 1987, and by then, public perception had mellowed. It was a strange case of hysteria trumping science, and even though the candy never posed a real threat, it disappeared from shelves all the same. It was a reminder of how easily fear can shape consumer habits, even when the facts don't support the panic. Then, there were the flame retardants. In the name of safety, manufacturers loaded pajamas, bedding, sofas, and even baby clothes with flame-resistant chemicals. The goal was to reduce house fire casualties, and it was hard to argue with that. Who wouldn't want an extra layer of protection for their kids? But years later, scientists discovered that these chemicals didn't just stay on the surface. They were seeping into our bodies through our skin. Studies linked them to developmental delays, hormonal disruptions, and serious long-term health problems. What was once considered a smart precaution turned out to be a hidden hazard. Even today, old couches and mattresses from that time still test high for these now banned substances. It's one of those classic examples of how doing the right thing with limited knowledge can backfire in unexpected ways. Another jaw-dropper, kids buying cigarettes. It sounds made up now, but in the 1970s, it was completely normal for a kid to walk into a store with a note from their mom saying, "Please sell my son a pack of Marlboro Lights." And the cashier would do it. Sometimes there wasn't even a note, just a familiar nod and a pack slid across the counter. No ID check, no questions. Just a candy bar, a Coke, and a pack of smokes, all in one quick errand. Vending machines with cigarettes were everywhere. Restaurants, bowling alleys, even gas stations. The idea that tobacco products would be that accessible to children today is laughable, but back then, it was just another part of life. And who could forget clackers? These simple toys, 2 acrylic balls on strings that you slam together to create a rhythmic clacking noise, were all the rage. The idea was to get them moving as fast as possible, creating a satisfying racket. But there was a catch. If they hit too hard or cracked mid-play, they could shatter and send sharp plastic shards flying into your face. Kids ended up in ERs with black eyes and facial cuts, yet that didn't stop the clacker craze. In fact, once schools started banning them, kids wanted them even more. The danger made them cooler. Artificial sweeteners were another topic of controversy. Cyclamates were all the rage in diet sodas and low-calorie foods, until scientists raised concerns about a potential cancer link in 1970. The US banned them quickly, even though later studies suggested the dangers were overblown. Other countries didn't follow suit and still use cyclamates today. Still, the damage was done in the States, and companies scrambled to switch to alternatives like saccharin, which came with its own set of controversies. Cigarette ads were also everywhere in the 70s. They dominated TV, radio, magazines, and billboards. Joe Camel, the Marlboro Man, these weren't just ads, they were icons. They made smoking look glamorous, rugged, sophisticated. But by 1971, the government finally pulled the plug on tobacco advertising on television and radio. That didn't stop cigarette companies, though. They just redirected their marketing dollars into print ads, movie product placements, and sponsoring major sporting events. The influence of these ads lingered for decades. If you ever flew in the 1970s, you'll remember that airplane cabins were literal smoke boxes. Designated smoking sections didn't help much because smoke doesn't respect imaginary lines in the air. Ashtrays were built into every armrest, and it wasn't uncommon for flight attendants to wade through clouds of cigarette smoke mid-flight. The transition to smoke-free flights began in the late 80s and wasn't fully complete until 2000. Today, just lighting a cigarette on a plane could get you arrested.
I appreciate everyone else's right to breathe clean air and whatever. It's a habit. I can break it. It really doesn't matter.
Lead paint was everywhere in the 1970s. On walls, baseboards, cribs, and even children's toys. No one thought twice about it, even as kids chewed on brightly colored furniture or peeled paint chips off windowsills. It wasn't until lead exposure was linked to serious health problems, especially in children.
Paint is chipped or cracked. Any place where we're finding lead dust, either in the soil, in the carpets, in your window wells.
That lawmakers finally took action. Lead-based paint was banned in 1978, but homes built before that still pose risks today. Renovating one of those homes often involves costly abatement processes to remove or seal the old paint.
They'll come in and they'll have a plan to make sure that all of that is remediated and that your home is safe for your children.
Lawn darts were another 70s favorite. Basically, steel-tipped missiles you tossed across the yard. They were supposed to land in a ring on the grass, but if someone walked into the target zone, it was game over. A number of serious injuries and even a few tragic deaths eventually led to the ban of the original version. Modern lawn darts are safer, but they lack the sheer thrill and danger of the originals. Looking back on all of it now, it's clear just how much has changed. Some of the laws and bans make total sense. We were genuinely putting ourselves at risk. Others feel like the end of an innocent time, where freedom and trust were given more easily, even if the consequences weren't fully understood. The 1970s may be long gone, but the memories of that wild, unregulated, chaotic time still linger. And while we might shake our heads now, deep down, many of us still miss that era when life was just a little bit more dangerous and a whole lot more fun.